the emphasis on the emphasis of clinicians is twofold, right? One is, well, who is the person, or what is the person? But more importantly, who could the person be, or what should they be? And that's a very strange thing about people, right? I mean, if you have a cat, you don't really sit around thinking, what could this cat be? Because it's a cat, and you know, if it has offspring, they're going to be cats, and in 1,000 years, they're still going to be just cats. But people, well, we're strange in ways that are virtually incomprehensible, and we're not only what we are, but we're also what we could be. And in many cases, especially for people of your age, you're way more what you could be than what you are. And so focusing on what you could be is an extremely important thing to do. And in fact, there's plenty of research, and some of it's associated with the writing exercises that I told you about earlier, that if you make efforts to define who you could be, and you know, in a way that you find interesting, because you might as well shape yourself into something that you want to be, that increases the efficiency with which you work substantially, and also makes you a better person by reasonable measures of better, which sort of means happier and healthier and, you know, more acceptable, or at least less repulsive to other people. So you can think of human knowledge in some ways as branching into two components. You can think of those two components as knowledge about the subjective world and knowledge about the objective world. That's one way of thinking about it. The other way you could think about it is knowledge about what things are and knowledge about what to do. Now, most of what you learn in university is knowledge about what things are. But that's only half of what you need to know, because you really need to know, well, what you should go about and do. And this is a real problem for human beings, because we're always trying to having to think up what we should be doing next. And like, that's the fundamental question of life, which is, well, you know, what should I do next? Or what should I do tomorrow? Or what should I do next week? Or next month? Or next year? Because that's another problem about being human, is that not only do we have to figure out what to do next, but we can also see the future. Or multiple futures even. And then we have to determine what those futures could be, and how to avoid others that we don't want to have come into existence at all, and then how to configure our behavior so that as we navigate through the potential futures, we land up more or less somewhere we want and not somewhere we really don't want. And so that's a real problem, and that's an existential problem, in fact. And what that means is that we need knowledge about the subjective and about the behavioral. It's part of potential. How do you unravel yourself across time? Now, it's proved very difficult for human beings to formalize that kind of knowledge. Now, we formalize scientific knowledge, which is more knowledge about what things are and about the objective world. The scientific method, especially the research method, formalizes our knowledge about the objective world and about what it's made of. But it doesn't give us much insight into what to do about that. All it seems to do, actually, is increase our power to do things, but not necessarily to inform us as to the direction in which that power should be exerted. And you don't really have to look any farther than the 20th century if you want historical proof of that, because as people got more and more powerful, so that we could sit in this lovely classroom and all be warm and cozy while it's terrible outside, we also learned how to kill each other with unprecedented gusto and potency. And so science has enabled us on both sides, and that's how it is, good or bad. On the behavioral side, there's a tradition of knowledge, and it's an ancient tradition, and it's grounded in forms of knowledge that are likely tens of thousands of years old, or maybe even older than that. And those are forms of knowledge that are essentially mythological or religious. And the reason that I start with those is, first of all, religious systems are in many ways theories of personality. And there's very tight associations between certain religions and certain fields of psychology. So Judaism has been identified fairly heavily with Freud, and Christianity with Carl Jung's work, and also with Carl Rogers' work. Rogers was actually a seminarian. And a lot of the ideas about what a person could be, so these are ideas about the ideal, are derived from religious and mythological substrates, because they have to be derived from somewhere, right? And so you think, well, how do people get their ideas about what's possible or what should be? Part of it's through storytelling. That's why you go to movies, right? You go there to see what people could be, and you enact all those people on the screen with your bodies while it's happening, and you have a little neural system that does that, so it puts you right in the action. It's an amazing ability, amazing human ability. And the reason we're so attracted to that sort of thing is because we want to know what to do with ourselves. And there's a very large body of very complex information that pertains to that. One of the things that Carl Jung said was that, one of the things he believed was that that form of knowledge had developed quite explicitly up to about the time of the Renaissance, or about to the time of Bacon and Descartes, who founded, and Galileo, who basically founded the scientific method. And then we sort of stopped developing that kind of knowledge, and the knowledge of the objective world just leaped ahead in like exponentially. And so that's left us with the same moral intelligence we had in the 1700s, but with 21st century technology. Not necessarily a good thing. So part of what we're doing, in a sense, is rescuing the past. You know, in my other class, sometimes I show Pinocchio, the movie. How many of you have seen Pinocchio? A lot of you, eh? So yeah, it's like the most popular animated movie ever made. Second, I think, is The Lion King. It's more popular. There's one scene in Pinocchio where Pinocchio rescues his father from a whale. You may remember that. You may notice that you watched that and that was perfectly fine as far as you were concerned, right? That you could watch a puppet swim with a cricket to the bottom of the ocean and rescue his father from a whale. It's like, okay. So the first thing you might think about is, how in the world could you sit there and swallow that? And not even notice that you were doing something as absurd and bizarre as any ritual you could possibly imagine. Well, it's partly because we're very attracted to narrative. And narratives have structure. Narratives are about behavior. And they have a deep structure, and they have a deep symbolic structure. So, for example, the whale in Pinocchio wasn't just any ordinary whale, right? Because if you remember, it also breathed smoke and fire. It's very strange behavior for a whale. And that made even a whale that strange. And that made it a dragon. And so partly what that meant was that Pinocchio was rescuing his father from a dragon. That's a very old story. In fact, that story is the oldest story that we have in written form. It's a variant of a story that was told by the Mesopotamians about 5,000 years ago. So, part of that story means, well, you should rescue your father. Well, from what? Well, from the murky chaos in which your culture is embedded. You know, you guys are all inheritors of rich cultural traditions. You know, those aren't just words. Those cultural traditions orient you. They keep you sane. And if they're desiccated and broken up and dead and archaic and lying in the bottom of the chaos, then you better get them back out of there, because without them you're going to live shallow and difficult lives. And that's a bad idea.